Are you ready to become a change maker? Our 48-week postgraduate program in public policy or the PGP may be just the thing for you. This hybrid program is designed to give you both the theoretical foundation and hands-on experience needed to excel in policy making. With a mix of expert-led webinars, in-person workshops, and policy simulation exercises, you'll gain real-world skills along with personalized mentorship. Through our policy programs, we connect good people to good ideas and good networks. Apply now at the link in the description to make an impact.
Welcome to All Things Policy, a daily podcast by the Takshashila Institution. We are a bunch of policy nerds based in Bengaluru, and we like bringing fresh perspectives to Indian affairs and Indian perspectives to global affairs. So grab a cup of coffee, sit back, and join us for today's chat.
Hi, welcome to today's episode of All Things Policy. My name's Adya and I'm going to be your host for today. And I'm going to be in conversation with my colleague Anwesha, who's done a lot of work on tech policy and AI governance. And today we're going to be talking about SMRs and AI. Over to you, Anwesha. It's so nice to have you.
Hi, Adya. Lovely to be here. I recently wrote a piece with my colleagues sort of on SMRs and AI, and I think this is quite topical at the moment, especially given the recent update with ChatGPT. It happened about a month ago where people were generating images now through ChatGPT, especially the Studio GP trend. And so one part of that was that so many people were hopping onto the trend that there were GPUs that were melting in the ChatGPT data centers, the OpenAI data centers, and that sort of brought to the forefront the environmental cost of compute power and electricity usage in AI. So I think drawing from that, we sort of looked up what could be sustainable alternatives to generative AI and power consumption for the same. And in the Indian context, obviously, we're trying to increase our AI sovereignty, which includes aspects of being self-reliant to an extent on how AI is developed and used, and that would obviously involve more developments in data centers, and we need to look at the sustainable aspects to that as well.
Okay, great. Thank you. Just to set some context for our listeners, can you explain exactly why AI technologies, especially things like training and running large models, need so much energy?
Sure. So, firstly, it's important to understand that an AI model goes through a lot of processes before deployment, after deployment. So it's a lot of use of electricity for the data processing. Then, depending on the model size, for example, ChatGPT has a comparatively large model size and it has billions or trillions of parameters, which demands a lot of high memory and compute power. Additionally, there's also a lot of intensive hardware use. Your GPUs and TPUs consume a lot of electricity, especially when they're deployed at scale, which is the case with big data centers. AI models take a lot of training time, so it can take weeks or months to train thousands of machines, train models across thousands of machines. So that is again a constant energy use. And then lastly, I think there's a high inference cost. So larger models, again, repeatedly require significant amounts of power. It's not that you use power once and then it's done. It's like a iterative, constant process. And so with retraining, deployment, and obviously the initial training as well, all of it requires huge amounts of power.
Okay, great. So looking at the projection, what would you say the expected growth in energy demand from data centers and AI infra globally is? And why is there a concern that this growth path could be unsustainable with the current energy sources that we have?
So in the future, in about 2032, 2035, data centers are set to account for about 10% of global electricity demand. And the current number is at about 3%. So now, while India itself is aiming for 500 gigawatts of renewable energy production by 2032 of a total of 650 gigawatts, which is a massive percentage of the total energy that will be produced in India. Globally, fossil fuels still play a major role. There's a need to update energy grids, and so for instance, in the US, there's the main issue that they face with data centers is the energy production, because a lot of their energy comes from fossil fuels. The grids aren't updated, and so power becomes a major area of contention. And there's another aspect to be considered here, which is the growing demand for water that is used in cooling. So water is used to prevent overheating in data centers, and other cooling systems like air conditioners, etc., would also use up a lot more energy. Hence, as of now, we resort to water-based cooling. So, for example, in Bangalore, data centers use close to 8 million liters of water per day, which is the equivalent of water that is consumed by approximately 50,000 people per day. And so, obviously, that's a massive number. And as Bangalore residents, we know that every summer there's a water shortage in Bangalore, and there needs to be better, water conservation in the city. And so obviously, and Bangalore is also not the biggest city in terms of data centers in India. Mumbai is the biggest; it uses a lot more water than that. And so, given that not only as a country but even across the world, we are overall facing water shortage, especially for the masses of the population, it's important to look at how even the cooling can be done sustainably. So at the moment, there are some initiatives that are coming up to reduce this sort of water usage. So, for example, waterless cooling technology, which uses direct to chip liquid cooling. So the chips are directly cooled, and that requires lesser water than using water to cool an entire data center. And there's also recycling initiatives, even in countries like in companies like Control S in India, which are recycling millions of liters of water annually to minimize fresh water consumption. So that's another aspect to the whole energy. I mean, I think this can be considered to be part of the energy and power conversation around data centers. So, yeah, I think we need to look at not just sustainable energy, renewable energy, but also how we can have more efficient cooling technologies, and that can also come from more efficient power usage.
Okay, thank you so much for that. I just wanted to ask to better understand and address the use of energy. What kind of transparency from AI companies themselves regarding their consumption would be beneficial? And how do you think this disclosure could help drive more sustainable practices in the industry?
So as as the two of us look into policies and analyze, how policies work, I think a big aspect of that is the data around various problem areas. So right now, for this instance, we can consider, power usage to be the problem statement, so to speak, and to further analyze where we're going wrong or what could be done better. We obviously need a lot more data. So just like how regulation mandate the disclosure of privacy practices surrounding data usage, to improve upon privacy regulations and how these regulations are implemented, companies could also be mandated to disclose their environmental impact. So this would involve things like how much energy is being consumed, where this energy is coming from, what steps are the companies taking to minimize energy consumption, etc. So this sort of data would help in providing further insights on where energy is being used the most, and then that could drive research and development to create a more sustainable model of AI development. And so that is on the part of, say, corporations and also, government funded research to improve sustainability in AI development. But then that also helps to guide policies and regulations around power consumption that is specific to AI. So how much renewable energy must be used for AI development, or what is the limit of water that can be used, etc. So these things can also then drive innovation around sustainable AI.
Okay, cool. Thank you so much. I think I understand the problem related to energy better now. Let's turn to potential solution. So, as you wrote about, there's a suggestion to explore nuclear energy, specifically small modular reactors or SMRs, as a way to meet this growing demand. What would you say makes SMRs a potential option for powering AI as opposed to other alternatives?
So small modular reactors are actually quite interesting in the way that they're not like traditional large scale nuclear power plants that demand a lot of land, water, and infrastructure. On the other hand, SMRs are designed to be compact and scalable, and so that flexibility allows them to be deployed closer to high energy demand facilities, which in this case would be data centers, and these data centers require consistent, reliable power to manage such vast amounts of computational workloads. So to solve for that as well, SMRs have an ability to provide 24 by 7 zero carbon electricity, and that also makes them an ideal alternative to renewable sources such as solar and wind, since there's a stable energy supply regardless of weather conditions. Moreover, I think benefits of SMRs extend beyond just energy reliability. So their modular construction reduces construction time and costs when compared to conventional nuclear plants, and that enables faster deployment to meet the rapidly growing demands of AI and data-driven industries. Moreover, obviously, a big part of the conversation around nuclear power is safety, and we've had a lot of unfortunate nuclear accidents in the past, but with SMRs, they provide passive safety systems, which relies on natural phenomena to cool the reactor core and safely shut down. So this reduces the risk of accidents as well. And obviously, there's SMRs are able to operate in diverse environments, whether it's an urban area, remote location, and that also supports the decentralization of energy production, thereby reducing transmission losses and enhancing grid resilience. But that's not to say that SMRs are the only solution to data centers to meeting the growing energy demands. Obviously, we need to also look at other alternatives. We need to have a combination of SMR, solar, wind, and all these other renewable sources. We also need storage systems for energy, because in India, especially, that is one of the issues with, our grids, and there needs to be upgradations with the grids. So it's a whole bunch of alternatives that need to be taken into account. But at the moment, there is a lot of research being done around SMRs, and India as well in the budget has planned for 5 operational SMRs by 2030. So there will be a lot of work that's being done around this particular type of energy production technology.
Okay, cool. Thank you. I have a question. So I know that implementing new energy technologies, especially, always comes with challenges. In terms of SMR specifically, what would you say the hurdles are facing their wider adoption, especially like concerning things like regulatory frameworks, waste management, or even something as simple as public acceptance?
Yeah, that's quite a pertinent question. Obviously, like I mentioned, nuclear energy is always something that's people are a bit wary of given our past. So there needs to be significant policy shifts, obviously, which would help to create more robust regulatory framework, which would address all these different aspects such as safety, waste management, and public perception. But given that a lot of these things, the way that the technology is designed, for example, accidents will be reduced. There are passive safety systems. So that already plays a role in which doesn't need regulations from the government itself. The technology is designed in a way that it takes care of some of these things by itself. But one major cause of concern is that there is a need for substantial upfront investment, and the returns may not be seen within the first few years. It would take a while for investors to break even. And the technology is also still maturing. It's a very new form of nuclear energy. No, it's a new format, so to speak, given that it's small and modular. Um, and there may also be issues of cost competitiveness when you look at established energy sources such as solar energy, wind energy. And if you talk about India, we do have a lot of potential for solar and wind energy. I mean, we can all see Bangalore summers have just completely gone, bonkers at this point. And so there's a lot of potential for a lot of good solar energy coming in from other cities as well, as opposed to, the traditional northwestern sort of areas or central areas in India. So that is one sort of cause of concern. But additionally, we need to coordinate the deployment of SMRs with existing renewable energy initiatives. So we would have to plan how to maximize these synergies while minimizing redundancy of any of these renewable energy initiatives. That being said, in India, we do have quite a robust plan for the next few years when it comes to renewable energy and reducing our dependence on fossil fuels. So in that sense, I would say we're going in the right direction, but globally there needs to be more of a focus on how to maximize efficiency when it comes to renewable energy deployment.
Okay. Considering the rapid growth of AI globally, just take a little bit of a step back. What would you say the particular considerations or challenges are for countries in ensuring that this tech boom is powered sustainably within their own energy landscapes?
So like I mentioned in the case of the US, they need a more grid resilience. They need to modernize their grids and make it more flexible to handle the variable nature of renewables, and also consider the high load that would be required for data centers, for AI usage, etc. That being said, I think apart from the US, China also has a similar need. There is, for both countries and also to an extent for India, there's a need to increase, sustainable energy development, and that needs to be done alongside AI development. So, in comparison with US and China, India currently has a much lower need for power for the data centers. We stand at about 1 gigawatt, wherein US stands at about 25 gigawatts currently, and it is poised to increase a lot more in the coming 4 to 5 years. So, in that sense, we don't quite have as much of a need for electricity or power. But having said that, there are many areas in India itself where there need to be improvements in the way that electricity is delivered, the way that power is consumed. When we move outside of tier one cities, there's still a lot that needs to be done. And this can also be an opportunity wherein you bring in, data centers towards the edge of, edge data centers, which aren't in tier one cities, and you move them outside. And then that also helps to bring electricity or more resilient, continuous power supply to tier two, tier three cities, rural areas. But there again, what needs to be considered is land usage, how these natural resources are being used in, especially in tier two, tier three cities, how that can be made more efficient and less invasive on populations that already live there. These are some things that need to be considered, especially in a diverse country like India. But in other regions across the world, overall, I would say that now is the time to push for sustainable energy. And now, given the geopolitical need to dominate AI, there is a chance, and I think this is already happening to a certain extent, that climate targets are being overridden, and there aren't enough regulations to ensure that this doesn't happen. And we're also not sure whether this is a problem that needs regulations. There needs to be something that's done that could also be, just corporations pledging perhaps to only to use sustainable energy, or other such, initiatives can be brought to the forefront instead of blanket regulations. So there's a lot that needs to be done in this space to ensure that the race for AI doesn't turn into a climate disaster. And thirdly, I think when we're looking at cooling and water use, every year we face one of the hottest summers ever. And it's just, I mean, climate change is obviously real and global warming is just increasing. And there needs to be a lot more done in that aspect. And now with AI coming in, there can be a lot of good that's done with AI. We can use AI to drive cooling, to drive energy efficiency initiatives, to drive sustainable energy projects. and overall to increase the use of renewable, and to see how that can be done. So the use of AI and R&D for such initiatives. But we need to keep in mind that AI does use a lot of energy, AI does use a lot of water, and we need to develop alternatives before we go overboard with AI data centers and not think about the power consumption and the water that is required to run these data centers.
Thank you. Thank you so much for that. Just to end on a slightly more hopeful note, I've heard and you've written that there's a suggestion that collaboration, perhaps through public private partnerships, could be key to developing and deploying sustainable energy solutions for AI. How do you think such partnerships could work effectively?
Yeah, so thank you for that. I think just maybe further from my previous point on how regulations may not be entirely necessary. So this is a good way in which we can make do without excessive regulations from governments. So one option could be, shared investment and risks. So private companies can bring in capital, innovation, operational expertise, but governments can then de-risk green energy projects by offering grants, tax breaks, other incentives. So there can be joint development of solar and wind farms, or grid scale battery storage, which is specific for AI data centers, but also not. I mean, for a country like India, generally we need more energy storage solutions, and that is something that is currently being developed. So we are again on the right path there as well. Moreover, there can be collaborations on grid upgrades to handle AI-related energy spikes and also to better integrate renewables. We also need to consider that there will be a lot more innovation being done in the energy space in the coming years. At least hopefully that is the case. And so there needs to be, faster upgrade on grids on how to integrate these newer technologies. So in this case, governments can fund grid expansion, and then private firms can provide the demand forecasts and demand response, and that sort of research can be done on the private part. And then thirdly, perhaps incentivizing efficient AI approaches. So, like we mentioned earlier, that companies should be more transparent about how they're using energy and what measures they have in place for more efficient energy usage. Here, the public sector or the government can set efficiency standards and then can reward companies that meet or exceed them. And so as a result, then private sectors start innovating on cooling systems, smart workload scheduling, or low energy chips, etc. So there's more innovation in that sense. I mean, the core idea here is that we provide incentives for private companies to be more energy efficient. There can also be shared innovation hubs and research and development, in the sense of joint labs or consortia to develop next gen cooling. Also, have more energy optimization for data centers, and also generally, I mean, I think efficient overall. Uh, and then again, localized benefits would include that these initiatives would lead to more local jobs. So there's job creation, there's skills training, there's also environmental protections as a result. And as a result, companies get a sort of social license to operate in communities that may be wary of data center expansion. So overall, I think some companies such as Google and Microsoft are already making use of such initiatives in other countries. But I think this can be done more on a global scale, where, or at least for India, where governments can partner with private companies. And there are obviously private companies that want to develop AI more sustainably. And so just providing that extra incentive, providing tax breaks, etc., that can really drive forward this sustainable AI development.
Thank you, Anwesha. And I think, as you've established over the last couple of minutes, and as our listeners will have something to think about, it's very important that AI doesn't become something which has huge climate footfalls. And I think going forward, energy needs to be something that becomes a priority, so development goes on in a sustainable manner. Thank you for that, and thank you to our listeners for listening along today.
So much, Adya.
If you liked our show, dive into Takshashila's research on technology, strategy, and economic affairs. Check us out at our Twitter handle @TakshashilaINST or our website takshashila.org.in.